Jai Bhim Namo Buddhaya. Sri Ratna Bodha Mahasangha India welcome you on the celebration of 1 week Buddha Jayanti. We are celebrating this Jayanti for a week in this lockdown period. It is a good opportunity for Buddhists and Dr.B.R.Ambedkar followers to practice the Dhamma and take it further. Today, we have Dhammachari Lokamitra with us. Lokamitra spent last 40 years in India, and he is the source of Sri Ratna Bodha Mahasangha. He is the main person who established Sri Ratna Bodha Mahasangha in India. He travels a lot, most of time out abroad in China, Hong Kong, Malaysia, UK, America, Hungary, in various places. And he's the ambassador of the Dr. Ambedkar thought, taking Dr. Ambedkar abroad and making connection with various school of the Buddhist. And he's making connection, not only he's making connection, but he is encouraging the other Buddhists to come to India and understand the Dr. Ambedkar. Lokamitra came to India to learn yoga, but he saw the energy of all the Dr. Ambedkar followers, but he realized they did not have the good direction, and he stayed here for last 40 years. He's the good friend, he is a good Calamus, and he is inspiration for all young people. He is the chairperson of Nagarjuna Training Institute, which is based at Nagaloka, and he's the main purpose who's taking Baba Sahib's thought, Buddhism, outside Maharashtra, outside India. And he's a very committed Buddhist. He's a very hard worker. I'm working with him last few years, and his inspiration, basically, he's the source of my inspiration. He's my hero. So such a person we have with us. So I'm requesting Dhammachari Lokamitra to guide us on this occasion. Dhammachari Lokamitra.
Namo Buddhaya Jai Bhim. Thank you very much, Teja Darshan. So first of all, I'd like to send you all my greetings for this Buddha Jayanti. It's a very strange time for us all. We've never celebrated a Buddha Jayanti like this. But strange though it is, difficult though it is, I hope that these remembering the Buddha's enlightenment will help us to develop the strength to go forward in these times. It was Dr.B.R.Ambedkar who brought most people in India to the Buddha in recent times. So most people see the Buddha through Baba Sahib's eyes. And Baba Sahib's approach is exemplified by the walking Buddha, the image of the walking Buddha we have at Nagaloka. Baba Sahib said he liked to see the Buddha walking out to people. So when we considered an image at Nagaloka, we thought we have to have the image that Baba Sahib liked. The Buddha walking out to people in compassion. So this spirit of Buddhism has to some extent been lost in Buddhist tradition. But if we go right back to the Buddha's first days as the Buddha, it's there. After 7 weeks of absorbing his enlightenment, the Buddha set off walking. 7 days it took him to get to Sarnath to meet his old disciples, to share his experience and to help them. At the end of that rainy season retreat, we're told he had 60 enlightened disciples. And what was his message? Not continue sitting under your trees, but go out. Bahujana hitaya, bahujana sukhaya, for the welfare and happiness of the many people. And the rest of his own life, he spent 8 months every year walking the roads of North India, continually going out to people. So Baba Sahib helped us to understand the Buddha perhaps in different ways than has come to be understood in some traditional practices and also among some new Western Buddhists. Now, even though this is Buddha Jayanti, I've been asked to speak not about the Buddha, but about Buddhism, the Buddha, his teachings and world problems. So I'm not going to speak so much about the figure of the Buddha, but I'm going to look at some of his teachings through the eyes of Baba Sahib, or through what I understand to be Baba Sahib's approach, that are relevant to the post-COVID-19 world. Now, it's extremely unclear how the world will be, not only for the rest of the COVID pandemic, not only immediately after the COVID pandemic, but also for the long term. But one thing is very clear. Great changes are taking place and will take place, or at least changes that have been taking place in the last few years are being and will be accelerated. Now, when we think of this, many points are becoming clear, and I'll just mention three. In recent years, all over the world, there's been the development of right-wing and populist governments. There's been a tendency towards authoritarianism. And this has been augmented or assisted by the control of data and the use of algorithms. We only have to look at Google, Facebook, Spotify, Amazon, and others, Twitter, and so on, to see how they work. In the last few years, both Google and Facebook have been challenged for holding the data they collect and use it for things to do with us, but without our permission. Google, Facebook, Twitter, and these other data-based organizations know how we're behaving, and increasingly they're knowing what we are thinking. They can predict our behavior. Yeah? If they know what we want to buy next, they know what we want to listen to next, they know where we are, where we're likely to go. Worse than that, or they go further than that, they can begin to guide and direct our behavior. Not only these multinational corporations, but governments are doing this too. We all know what happened in the US elections in 2016. I don't know whether this noise is too much for you. I can shut the windows if that's helpful. Is that okay? Okay. They can guide, So we know what happened also in the UK with the vote on Brexit. The data that organizations collected about people were manipulated to try and help the Trump and Brexit win. We know that Russia was involved in this. We know that China is to some extent involved in this. And we can be quite sure that this is happening in most other places in the world. People are going to do what they can to get power, to get influence, to get people to buy their products. One of the most recent developments in this area is using apps to determine people's health. Now, this is very interesting because once that is done, then the app can begin to understand our moods and reactions, because these are basically physical these manifest physically. If we're happy, if we're sad, if we're angry, if we're jealous, our blood pressure is affected, our temperature might be affected, our eye movements are affected, and our brain activity is affected. And these apps can begin to measure or identify all this. So say the ruler of the country wants to find out how we responded to his talk. He can find out, she can find out from whether when we were talking, our blood pressure went up or down, our brain activity changed. They can tell whether we liked the talk, whether we didn't like the talk, whether we were angry with it, and so on. So they may know, they may think, oh, that person's a potential enemy, that person's a potential friend, and then act accordingly. So you can see how data and authoritarian rule begin to go together, or can go together. This historian, this very popular historian at the moment, Yuval Noah Harari, made the point that mankind is very good at inventing things, but not so good at using them. So mankind may invent a sword or a hammer or something, but may use it in a different way than was not originally intended. So it's understandable that many, many people in the world at present are concerned about the increasing movement towards authoritarian governments, who controls the data and how they use it. So the second point I want to start off with is looking at the difference between the rich and poor. And this inequality is growing wider and wider. For some time after the Second World War, there was a movement, or there seemed to be a movement, towards more equality in the world. But that hasn't been the case over the last 40 years. It's actually been going the other way. And this coronavirus has exposed this enormous inequality that still so many people suffer from throughout the world, and especially in India. Here, just down the road from me, in the slums of Yaroda, I understand that thousands and thousands of people are being moved. The government is trying to help, but what a thing to have to do, be uprooted like this. People in the slums here do not have a chance. There's no possibility of physical distance. Water is not easy. Most people are on daily wages, and lots of their work is stopped. Most will have nothing in the way of financial reserves. This doesn't happen to the middle classes and the wealthy people in the same way. People say that the virus is a great equalizer, but actually the opposite is true. And we don't know how long the virus will go on, but one dreads to think what sort of havoc it's going to create in the lives of so many millions of people who are very poor. And I haven't said anything yet about the migrant workers. Then my third point is this. In recent years, more and more people have been working online. They've been working at home. This is happening very, very much now, and is likely to continue and be much more the case after this. And this has very strong social impact. At home or wherever we are, working alone, on the computer all day in meetings, on Netflix at night, we're just cut off from others, we're isolated. Our food is delivered to the door. That doesn't quite happen here yet. Now, human beings are social animals. They need each other. They need to feel the warmth of others. They need to be able to interact with others. Otherwise, they get anxious and they get confused. So adjusting to living, working and living online is going to be a great deal of difficulties and could lead to lots and lots of social problems. So this evening, I want to look at these questions through the window that Baba Saheb gave us on the Dhamma. And Baba Saheb's approach was through the window of social transformation, and especially through the three values of liberty, equality, fraternity, which are the foundation for him of social democracy and is essentially Buddhist values. So I call these his three paramitas. and paramitas are values that strengthen us so that we can more effectively help others and society. But they're not just values and principles that we acknowledge, they're practices. We try and cultivate these values, make them stronger within ourselves. We try and make them part of our core attitudes. So the first one is freedom, liberty or freedom of mind. Now, I've talked about these often, and some of you may have heard me, but I'll talk slightly differently today. We do not want to be manipulated by big media companies. We don't want them to use our data and algorithms they develop to manipulate us, to get us buy something that normally we wouldn't necessarily buy, or to get us vote for someone who we hadn't thought about. So if we want to combat the tendency towards populism and authoritarianism, the first thing, control of our lives through our data, the first thing to be is that we have to be very clear and strong in our own minds. The Buddhist teaching on the Calamus Sutra is the most relevant here. He said, "Come, Calamus, do not go by what has been acquired by repeated hearing, nor by tradition, nor upon rumor, nor upon what is in a scripture, nor upon surmise, nor upon logic or specious reasoning, nor upon a bias towards something that's been thought over again and again, nor because someone just seems capable and able, nor because that person is our teacher, that person is a monk." This was 2,500 years ago. At that time, people found it very hard to understand the influences and the conditions on our own minds. Now, how much harder must it be? Advertising is said to be the biggest industry in the world. I haven't verified that, but people say that. And the point of advertising is to manipulate our minds, to get us to buy their product. And these data companies and media companies have taken this so much further. We couldn't imagine 30 years ago the way Facebook, Google, Twitter, and so on operate. And even now, we have an idea how they operate, but we have no idea probably of the power they have over us or the power they influence in the world. So government and multinational companies want to get us to support them in whatever way. They get information about us so they can get us to do that. They can say, if they get information about us, knowledge is power. If they know something about us, they can sort of maybe work with us to go in this direction. And what they do, they bypass our rational thinking mind. They appeal directly, like advertisers, to our emotions. They pretend, sometimes advertisers pretend to appeal to our rational mind, our reasonable mind. Some advertisements can be very, very reasonable, but actually they're not. They're appealing to something sort of below that. So what does that mean for most of us? They play on our weakest parts, our greed, our desires, our hatreds, our attachments to family, group, and nation, our jealousies, our confusions. So how do we make sure that we're aware and conscious in our thinking and our decision making? How do we make sure that we can maintain our freedom of maneuver, our freedom of mind? How do we use what are, in many ways, incredible developments in science and technology, but not be used by them? How do we develop a mind that cannot be biased, a mind of wisdom, the goal of the Buddhist life. This, to Baba Sahib, freedom of mind, was of supreme importance. I quote this often. I'll just quote a couple of words here, not the full thing, but from Which Way Freedom, a talk he gave in Mumbai in, I think it was 1936. He says, a person whose mind is not free, though he is not in chains, is a slave. Though he is not in jail, is a prisoner. Though he is alive, is dead. A person who is the master of his own life, him alone I consider a free man. So this is exactly the question before us. How do we develop that freedom that was so dear to Baba Sahib, that was the essence of Buddhism in this time of increasing threats? So he talks about this, Baba Sahib, in the Buddha and his Dhamma, in the section on Saddhamma. And he says, we develop freedom of mind, we develop prajna, wisdom, by destruction of the ashavas, or the tendencies in us towards being biased, the capacity in us towards being biased. You know, there are tendencies in us that allow us to be biased, that become open to being manipulated. So by the destruction of these tendencies in this very life, through comprehending it by himself, he realizes the heart's release, the release by wisdom. So we approach this in two ways, through the release of the heart and the release of wisdom, or prajna. Now, the release of the heart really means what we call cultivating the creative mind as opposed to the reactive mind. And we can say there are two parts to this. There's the part which is restraint from doing what is unhelpful, and there's the cultivation of what is skillful. Now, restraint, you know, we talk of the 5 precepts, panati pada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I will refrain from doing this. I will refrain from doing that. I will stop doing this. So we refrain from unskillful actions. We just stop ourselves doing that. Yeah? We see ourselves about to harm someone. We see ourselves about to tell an untruth. We see ourselves about to do something that's going to confuse us, and we just stop. But that's not all there is to being a Buddhist. That's only the very beginning of the path. The next part also has to be there. That's stopping unskillful actions and thoughts, stopping behavior on the basis of confusion or instability, stopping behavior on the basis of sense experience. Yeah? This gives us space. And I'm sure you've all experienced this. You know, you've been tempted to get angry with someone, or you've got annoyed, and you just stopped yourself. And that's given you a space. And it's within that space that we can begin to cultivate skillful mental states based on non-greed or generosity and contentment, non-hatred or loving kindness and compassion, non-ignorance or awareness, wisdom and understanding. We can't do that easily when we're in unskillful mental states. We have to let go of those unskillful mental states first. And then we can begin to cultivate skillful mental states, and we do that especially through meditation. And when we meditate, or when our minds are entirely skillful, when they're not disturbed by greed, hatred, or delusion, confusion, at that time, we can develop prajna. Yeah? We can begin to overcome wrong views. Wrong views are the opposite of wisdom. Wrong views are views that come out of ignorance. And wrong views you can say, are manifestations of our ego identity, the part of ourselves that wants to be separate, doesn't want to change, that is attached to itself, is attached to a particular political hue, attached to the idea of God, attached to caste, attached to gender, attached to a football team, a cricket team. We see our identity in those. In England, in Europe, there's often a lot of violence at football matches. Why? Why would we get violent over a football match? Because we see our identity in that team. It sounds so silly, but that's the case. That's the case with caste. That's the case with religion. That's the case with politics. We sort of project our identity onto these things outside us. So I'm not going to go more into this. I'm sure you'll have other talks which look at these basic elements of the Dhamma in more depth. The point is, both heart and wisdom have to go together. If you don't have the cultivation of the heart, the cultivation of skillful mental states, your wisdom is likely to be skewed. You may have a good understanding, but it will be directed by your own unskillful mental states, your hatred, your greed, and so on. And if you don't have wisdom on your and you only have the heart, well, I don't know whether you know the wheel of life. The wheel of life is a Tibetan symbol, and it's really a picture of samsara, and it's got 4 circles. I'll just mention the second circle. The second circle has a white half and a black half. And in the white half, you see people doing good things, practicing the Dharma, practicing generosity, helping people, and so on. And they're moving up. And then the second half is a black half. And those people are falling down. And they're pulling each other down too. And they're in states of anguish, deep pain, deep suffering. So the problem with just opening our hearts without developing wisdom is that can always change. Baba Sahib has a lovely story, well, actually not very pleasant story, in the Buddha and his Dhamma on the section to do with metta. And this woman, prides herself on the Dhamma, but she reacts so easily to her maid's behavior. And so this is so often the case. We have a sort of positive face in the world, and it may be genuine, but we cannot manage difficulties. We get angry, we get anxious. So it's prajna which confirms the developments of the heart. So wisdom is I just mentioned this because this is very sort of topical. The Buddha gave the Ratana Sutta teaching at the time of an epidemic, a plague in the town of Vaishali. And it's a beautiful, beautiful sutta. And I hope to study it again with a few of my colleagues soon. But basically, he's saying, make your mind strong, make your minds unshakable, make them clear, full of wisdom, open the heart. Yeah. And that's what we're going to need during this pandemic and after this pandemic, more than ever. We have to make our minds really, really strong. But developing our minds is only the beginning of our Dhamma practice. In writing about Sadhamma, Baba said the real test for the Dhamma was how it manifested in our lives. We can practice prajna, shila, karuna, metta, but if they don't manifest in the way we live, it doesn't say much for our practice. There's no real practice. It's in a sense just making ourselves comfortable for the Dhamma. It's just working within ourselves. And that is not the Dhamma. So how did he say it should manifest? Well, he was very direct. He said it should manifest in pulling down all social barriers. It should manifest in breaking down barriers between people. It should manifest, especially, he said, in establishing equality. And inequality, he felt, was the cause of so much suffering. Now, when I started Triratna in India in 1978 with colleagues, we found that, well, we were teaching the metta bhavana, we were teaching about karuna. But we found that we couldn't just do that. We found we had to respond to the terrible suffering we saw all around us. And although things are pretty bad today, they were much worse 42 years ago. We couldn't ignore the way people lived. Some people came to our classes without shoes. Some people really lived in terrible conditions. So we decided we had to start social projects, and we developed, as a result, many health and education community centers in the slums. We started many hostels. We responded to calamities, to the Latur earthquake in 1993, the Gujarat earthquake in 2001, the tsunami, the Mumbai floods, the Kerala floods, and now the worst of all, the pandemic. We also responded to atrocities and human rights violations. All these have shown us how ugly the inequality in India is. And the pandemic has shown that up more than ever. What we've done in Triratna in the past is great, but it's only the beginning. This pandemic has shown us that we have to do so much more. We have to work much more deeply, much more fully on this inequality which causes so much suffering. We can't ignore it anymore. We can't go on after this pandemic as we were before. We have to respond much fully. Our teacher, Sangharakshita, warned us. He said that the sin of Buddhism is laziness, complacency, and indifference. It's so easy to meditate on impermanence, so easy to meditate on suffering, so easy to meditate on karuna and metta, and just keep it there, thinking that good thoughts is enough. But Baba Sahib showed us it's not enough. Now, we're proud of what Triratna has done in the past and is still doing, and we're rightly so, we're proud. But now, as a movement, Triratna is much more developed than in the early days in terms of Dhamma teaching and practice. So many people have been practicing for 30, even 40 years. So many people have so much experience. So many people have a very good understanding of the Dhamma. So we have to continue to develop our practice as much as possible. We have to keep doing this. We have to keep making our minds more skillful, more free. We have to keep up our practice of metta, karuna. We have to keep on doing in the order of the bodhicitta practices. But we also have to make sure that our work against inequality keeps pace with that, even goes beyond that. We have to do what we can to combat this terrible sin of inequality. Can we now rise to this greatest of challenges? This is the test of our Dhamma practice. My last point relates to the fact that more and more people are working online and will be working online. And it's going to increase enormously. Now, this is going to have a very strong social impact. Already people are feeling very isolated. And as I said, human beings are social animals. We need each other for warmth. We need each other for clarity. We need to be able to talk to each other, to throw around our ideas, to find out the best course of action. We need to be able to talk to our friends, our teachers, our parents. And yes, to some extent, we can talk online, but it's not the same as when we have that sort of direct physical presence. And when people are isolated, they can get in terrible states of anxiety and confusion. They can do terrible things. They can do terrible things to themselves. They can get in very, very weird mental states. And they can do horrible things to others. Some of those who have committed the most horrific gun crimes in the USA, especially with children, some of those terrorists in the West come from very, very isolated situations and have lived much of their lives just online, cut off from people. So this is where the paramita, the fraternity, comes in. But as Baba Sahib said in the Riddle of Brahma, the real meaning of fraternity is so much more than fraternity. He said the essence of fraternity is the Buddhist practice of metta. And he also said in the Buddha and his Dhamma, fraternity guarantees liberty and equality. Yeah. Now, metta is universal, as we know. It's not restricted to family, to group or nation. It's unlimited. If there's no metta, why would we want to practice equality? If there's no metta, if we don't have metta for others, we'll just be out for ourselves. Yeah? We'll take what we can. We're not concerned about others. Yeah? Of course, some people are stirred by theory, by rationale and so on. They generally want an end to inequality, but it's more from their head than the heart. And it's the heart where the energy is. It's the heart which gives us the energy to engage really actively against inequality. And metta is always expanding outwards, so no one is left out. Remember, the Buddha, we're told, practice compassion meditation in the mornings. And this was an outward going practice. He tried to find out who near him was suffering, and he would go out and see them and help them. So this is the proactivity that is implied in our practice of metta and karuna. This is what we need now. In a sense, the metta we've been doing is not enough. After our metta practice, we need to sit down and think, okay, now I've developed metta to all people throughout the world. I've tried to do it equally. How can I now put this into practice? How can we extend metta, karuna to those who are becoming increasingly isolated? How can we help them live more satisfying lives through the Dhamma? How can we let them feel the warmth of our Dhamma hearts? We may have to do much more online, but we may have to be much, much more creative than we are now. Yeah? So this is another great challenge for us. But it's one that we will have to rise to if we want to remain alive as an order and as a movement in the post-COVID era. This is not just a question of others, of other people, but it's a question of the Sangha, itself. Sangha actually, in one of his first talks in Pune in 1979, said that metta is the cement of the Sangha. Now, in Triratna, we usually work on the basis of consultation, keeping very, very closely in touch with each other. We have lots of meetings. I mean, sometimes they're just too much. Sometimes I feel we can't work properly because we have so many meetings. But the point of these meetings is to listen to each other carefully, for us to be able to express our views and to come to a consensus so that we go together in the best possible. We use the best of each other and go forward. Now, this is not nearly so easy in meetings that take place online. You know, we're there for, you know, it has its advantages, online meetings, because we can meet with people from Orissa, with Arunachal Pradesh, from Kerala, from Gujarat in one meeting. It's amazing what we can do. But at the same time, it doesn't have the same impact that a physical meeting has when we see each other's body language, we see each other's eyes in different ways. We can see more, oh, someone's in difficulties, yeah? Someone's uneasy, and we can respond, we can modify our meeting to take that into account. And then after the meeting, you know, the meeting is with people from many different places in very different situations, rather than a meeting in our office where we're all together for cups of tea and so on, or on a campus. So we're in completely different situations afterwards. And the danger is we get lost in our own space. Yeah, we're cut off from others, so we're just alone, and we just go on in our own way. So this is something we have to be very, very careful of. If we're not careful, we'll lose the spirit of Sangha in the working situation, which is one of the great hallmarks and contributions of the Triratna order and movement. So working more online is going to be a great test of how we consult with each other, how we keep people in our minds, how we practice Sangha together. So I hope you can see how I call these three: liberty, equality, fraternity, as paramitas. They're practices. That's what paramitas are. Paramitas are practices that strengthen us so that we can help others more effectively, so that we can overcome our weaknesses and cultivate our strengths. They're the practices of the would-be Bodhisattva. Baba Sahib emphasized the practices of the paramitas in the 22 vows and in the Buddha and his Dhamma. In other words, he wanted us all to strive to be bodhisattvas. He wanted us all to practice the Dhamma, not just for ourselves, so that we could help to liberate, improve society. This is his legacy to us. This is in his inheritance to us. Not freedom for us as individuals so that we can individually and in our families and community lead better lives. But he gave us work. He gave us work not only to liberate ourselves, as he said, but to liberate society. The coronavirus is the biggest challenge most of us have ever had in this life. And certainly the biggest challenge Triratna as a movement has faced. Can we rise to that challenge by developing our minds even more, by manifesting our practicing in establishing equality, and by being much more proactive in our metta? This virus is shaking the whole world. Many, as I said, are moving towards authoritarianism. But we're lucky in India. I know some people don't share my optimism. India's politics may be chaotic, but we have a very, very resilient constitution and democracy. And I believe this constitution and democracy could be a pillar of strength, an example for other democracies in the world that are threatened by authoritarian and populist tendencies. And when people look at India's democracy, what will they see? They'll see the towering figure of Baba Sahib. They will see his incredible integrity, his panacea for the ills of India, and the fact that he stands unequivocally for all those who suffer inequality. And then they will want to know more about his ethical approach to a socialistic democracy, an approach based on the attitudes of freedom of mind, equality, and metta, an approach that he said he learned from the Buddha, his master. More and more people in India and the world, because of him, will want to know about the Dhamma. And they will look to those who practice the Dhamma, those who make up Sanghas, for guidance. Are we in Sri Ratna ready to take on this challenge? Are we ready to take our practice to a new level? Namo Buddhaya, Jai Bhim.
Dhanyavad, Dhammachari Lokamitra ji. You have enlightened us and shows the path which Dr.B.R.Ambedkar and Buddha has shown us. You have reminded us about the Baba Sahib's vision, Buddha's vision. So thank you very much. And hopefully, as you mentioned, we will try to rise up to fulfill the Dr.B.R.Ambedkar's vision, Buddha's vision, and practice Dhamma more effectively and go out for the benefits of all. Thank you very much, not just for giving this talk, but coming to India, establishing the Triratna movement in India, establishing Dhammachakra Pravartan Mahavihar Pune, Manuski Eravda, Bhaja Retreat Center, Bordharan Retreat Center, and now Effective Center Nagalok. So thank you very much. We owe you a lot. So thank you very much again. Tomorrow we are going to listen Dhammachari Nagaketu at 11:30, and tomorrow evening we will have Dhammachari Subhuti with us in the evening at 7 o'clock. Day after tomorrow, there are two talks. One is at 11:30, delivered by Dhammachari Jinasiddhi, and in the evening, 7 o'clock, Dhammachari Anomshur. On the 7th, we are having whole day program for Buddha Jayanti from 10 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Please follow us on website, Facebook, WhatsApp. I'm thanking Lokamitra again, and thank you very much for watching this program. Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.